sort of place that was a bit dodgy, and I said to my friend, no, we've got to go, it's just not. So we would have been in Phuket at the time of the tsunami.
I did stay there, admittedly, too long for the wrong reason. So just give a massive shout out to our sponsors, Your Property Furnished, who cover the whole of the United Kingdom for service accommodation and HMO furniture. Click the link below and see if they can help you out now. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we have Demelza Smith, the short lease queen herself. She's been investing in property for over 20 years, so you can imagine the changes that she's seen in that time. Demelza has a master's degree and she's also training to be a qualified surveyor. Demelza, welcome to the show. It's 20 years investing.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
I know. That is a long time. Which is a bit crazy even for me, because I'm like, oh gosh, I can't believe it's like 45, almost. I'm like, I don't want to be 45 yet. I'm not ready for that. I still feel 25. Yeah, but no, it's interesting, because you don't think of numbers, do you? Like, of your life. You just sort of, I think my mum said that to me. She's like, one day you wake up and you're just like, you're older, and you don't really, you've sort of not realised, you know, you forget about the process, innit? We're living life. We're not always reflective. So for me, it's like, oh, wow, that's a long time ago. And then I tell people, oh, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. And it's not sort of 20, it is 20 years consecutively, because I've never done anything else. Well, I started really probably in 2005, properly investing, although I did start in 2003 buying 2 properties, and then I really decided, I left my job as an estate agent in 2005 and said, right, I'm not going to do anything else now. I'm going to just invest in property and become like an investor, developer, landlord, landlady. And that happened because I'd been working in some crap jobs that I didn't really like. They weren't really crap jobs. There was actually, some of them were quite good jobs after uni. I worked in the music industry for a bit, but the money was terrible. Never earned any money there.
What did you do in the music industry?
I was an A&R assistant, which was not intentional either. I wanted to go into music marketing because it sounded fun, and my degree had been in design, so I was like, okay, it's creative. I can kind of like use a bit of, you know, it's a creative kind of area to go into. And I weren't really getting any ins, and then I got a position as an A&R assistant, and after doing lots of work experience for free, I was working at like all the big labels, doing free work experience, working at HMV at the weekends as a I used to look after the vinyl section, which was quite good. I felt like I was a little bit, we used to have a DJ booth in the middle of like HMV and Oxford Street, so that was quite fun. But again, that was just like a means to an end to support my sort of free work experience I was doing in the week. And I thought I'd go down that route, but it just was taking so long and I didn't really have much patience. And I ended up leaving because my friend, well, I left sort of music after sort of trying to get in there for like 2 years. And I went and got a job local to where I lived after I'd bought these like 2 properties, which it was like a slow, gradual process out of the music industry. I was trying to get in, weren't having much luck. Managed to save enough money to buy my first property, sort of refinanced it very quickly. No, I didn't refinance it, sorry. I managed to buy my second property with a really low deposit at the time. And then I then started like thinking of ways to exit my job because I wanted to go backpacking, but I realised I still didn't really have like enough money, so I got a job in a travel agents, which still wasn't earning very much money. There's a theme here. And then finally I got a job as an estate agent and negotiator in North London, and that was all very based on it being convenient. My friend had a job as a negotiator in another branch. She said there's some jobs going, and I did that, and it was just again a vehicle to save money to do what I really wanted to do, which was at the time I just wanted to take a break, go backpacking around the world, and I kind of figured out 2 properties would be enough to support me travelling. Initially, in the first idea of buying the properties, I realised the first one would pay for the second one, and and that's kind of where it all started. And then when I backpacked, that's when I really sort of started to see everything a bit differently. You know, like everyone always talks about your mindset, especially in property. Everyone's like, oh, you've got to have, you got to have a mindset shift. And it wasn't really intentional. Like, I didn't think, right, when I go away, I'm going to... But when you do travel and you see the world, and especially at that time, there was like no social media. I had no access to anyone really back home. They didn't even have like... when I first went travelling, they didn't have MSN. You know, that thing where you could like talk to people at the same time back home. They didn't have that. But then it came out while I was there and was like, you know, wow, we can talk to people back home. Sometimes we'd be like in internet cafes, like trying to find anyone who'd be online. Might have been your school friend from like 10 years ago or something, you know. So it was really like a very different experience, like travelling them. And, you know, I was like sending postcards home. I've still got like postcards now that my aunt kept, because I was, you know, you're in your thoughts a bit like, you know, imagine, you know, now we've got so much access, like we'd be on Instagram updating what we're doing. I'll cover a postcard and it'd be like, yeah, I went to visit this place today and it was lovely. Saw some lions or whatever, or like, you know, some animal. And then...
Talk to me about the properties, because how long ago did you start investing?
So, like I said, it was 20 years ago. So the first 2 properties I bought were in 2003. And that was just based off... I bought one, and then the second one I bought was in the same year. And I realised if I bought a second property, I could essentially rent out the first one and it would pay for the second one.
Tell me about the figures that you talk. Like, how much profit did you make on them?
Well, not really. I didn't really make any profit at the outset because they weren't massively below market value. But it was, at the time, you could buy... I mean, I bought a little flat. It was under 100,000 in North London, but that's what they were at the time. And the second house I bought was it was a house, but it wasn't a short lease house. It had a lease, so it was a leasehold house. So it'd been sat on the market for ages because no one wanted it because it was leasehold. But, you know, unbeknown to me, like completely inexperienced, knew nothing. I was like, oh, well, that's really cheap. I'll go for that. And I remember I made an offer, and I did make an offer below market price, below market value. But at the time, I didn't really know why I was doing that. I just thought, oh, I'll be cheeky. But the only reason I know this actually is because I actually thought I paid what it was marketed for, because I've still got the marketing particulars at home. But I didn't think... I thought up until recently, I thought I paid market value. But then I went into my documents recently. I was like, oh, I did pay below market value. So I think I must have just been being cheeky and they give it to me a bit cheaper.
And what were some of the lessons you learned from that? So I can pretty much guarantee it weren't all plain sailing, was it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, that one, I bought it and it was a wreck even when I bought it. There were so many things wrong with it. Like, it had a lease, so it was 999 years, which it was about 960 when I bought it. So that's why people didn't want it. You also had these like rickety stairs that went through the middle of the house, which were like, you walked up, they were terrible. And then you went through one bedroom to get to the bathroom. So it's like, you know, a little 2 up, 2 down. You get them sort of properties up north, but this was in North London. And it just had like wood chip paper everywhere. It was just disgusting. It had a boiler in it that, again, I was like, oh, it's a house. You know, that was my sort of 25-year-old thinking. And the night that I moved in, the boiler didn't ever turn on, and that was it. And it was like November or something, so it was really cold. So and that was just a bit of a practice house for me. I like sort of tore it apart, got builders in, bad builders, did bits and pieces, and sort of did like a kind of slapdash refurb. And then I got like a lodger, I think, and then I packed up everything and I went backpacking. So I was now working in estate agents as a negotiator, and then I kind of packed everything up, went backpacking and left that. But I did do a little bit of a refurb, and I did manage to refinance it quite early on. So I took a little bit of money after it increased the value, and that was sort of my backpacking money. So I learnt loads there. And then I went on this trip, come back. When I was away, I went with my friend who only stayed with me for like sort of 6 weeks. I think she was about 6 weeks, and then she went home. She didn't really enjoy it, the experience, and we was having completely different. I think we went for totally different reasons.
Whereabouts did you go?
We started off in East Asia, so we went to the Philippines, Hong Kong, Thailand, Cambodia, and then my friend went home when we went to Cambodia, and then I went on to Singapore, Australia, and then briefly stopped in New Zealand, and then went round to South America and did all of South America, and then up to sort of Mexico. But yeah, so I spent a long time in Chile, Brazil, Argentina.
Did you ever feel
Peru.
anxious when you was travelling alone?
Yeah, so my friend went home. I remember she went home like a couple of days before Christmas, and she went out the blue. She was like, right, I'm going home. And we'd sort of had a bit of like a falling out at the time. Like, this is like my best friend. I've known her since I was 6. She's like, I'm going home. I'm like, oh. So I had a decision, like, do I stay or do I go? And I was like, no, I'm staying. And I remember I was in like on Koh San Road, and this is in Thailand. Like, if you've ever been to Thailand, Koh San Road is like quite a busy touristy destination in Bangkok. And I was like, oh, okay, what do I do? So I was like, I'm just going to get like a coach to Koh Samui, because that's where it's at, I've heard. So I went there. So I went to Koh Samui on my own. And then I met people, and then it was fine. And then I met loads of people. And then I made really good friends with a lot of people that became friends. People that I've travelled to see again since. I've been, to other parts of the world to visit them, like back to Los Angeles. I've visited friends in people that are not from, people that like, I've got a couple of friends from Australia, but then we've met up in Europe. Yeah, so that was scary, but it was like that sort of turning point. It's like a bit of a sliding doors moment. Do I go home or do I sort of stay here? And I think going on my own was, at the time, I remember I was always like quite scared of being on my own. I was like, oh, I don't want to be on my own. And it's that thing, isn't it? Like, face your fears, just do something. And I did, and it was like the best thing, because then the rest of that trip I was on my own. And now I look back, I probably wouldn't do that now. But at the time, I think you've got like this a bit of fighting spirit, but then you've also got like, I just sort of believed in like, I was sort of being looked after kind of thing. Like, you always have someone like, the universe or God, or whatever you want to call him or her, looking out for you. So I always felt quite safe. And there was times, but you really learn to be like really intuitive, because you got to listen to yourself. You got to kind of listen to what, there was loads of times when things didn't feel right. And that was when I was on my own. And that was also when I was with friends. I remember being somewhere with a friend when we was in Brazil, and we was in this sort of place that was a bit dodgy. And I said to my friend, we've got to go. It's not good here. And, maybe that might even sound like a bit of paranoia to someone else, but I prefer to lean into my intuition than of taking a risk with something that didn't feel right.
What happened in Brazil?
Well, it wasn't, I think we was out with these like, some friends that we'd met, and then there was a couple of guys, and they were just all a bit dodgy, but you're always in situations like that, and they just were sort of like making funny innuendos, just the usual things. It was like, no, let's just go. But you may do things like that when you're here in your own country, but it's just about, sometimes when you're away, you let your guard down and you feel like, oh, I'm on holiday. But when you're travelling, it's not like you're on holiday. You're in a place, and you won't always be in holiday destinations either. You might be places that are a little bit off the beaten track, and you're with locals, and you're with people who may or not have a perception about you, about where you're from, what you got, or, and it's not to be fearful of people, but it's just, and it's not even just people. It might be something else. It might be, like when my friend left, for example, we was due to go to Phuket. So this is 2005. And it was coming up to Christmas 2005. But because she left, I went to Koh Samui. But if she stayed, we'd planned to go to Phuket. And they had the tsunami. So we would have been in Phuket at the time of the tsunami. But because she left, I went off to another destination. So when that tsunami happened, I was in Thailand. All my family were ringing me and I was like, oh, where are you? And I was like, I'm in Thailand, I'm at the beach. And they're like, no, get off the beach. And I'm like, no, but and I didn't know that had happened at the time because, it wasn't like, Instagram times.
Yeah, I bet your family's emotions were all over the place, weren't they?
Yeah, so at the time, no one really knew that. But so that's what I'm saying about listening to your intuition. So even her going home, at that time, I was like, oh, should I go with her? But I didn't, I stayed. So there was something that obviously I was listening to then that made me think, right, I'm going to stay and carry on. And then me carrying on, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to carry on to Phuket without her. I'm going to go somewhere completely different.
So you've obviously been travelling. I want to unpack a lot of the stuff that you've already spoken about. Like I do with most of the guests that come on the podcast.
Yeah, go on.
You know what's coming.
No, it's all right.
Take me back to your childhood. What was it like
Well,
growing up in London?
I grew up in North London in various parts. I started off in Tottenham and I lived there until I was about sort of 16, maybe, about that time. And my mum and dad were together. They broke up when I was about 10. There was my parents had me in a time when, I'm mixed race, so my parents is like, my dad's Caribbean, Jamaican, my mum's English, but my dad was born here, so he's very much, he's I don't know if he's first generation from the Windrush. And so I had a very sort of mixed childhood in that I was sort of integrated with both sides of my family. I lived at a time when most people that I know, was talking about this with a friend the other day, where you grew up with your aunts and uncles and cousins and everyone was always in and out of each other's houses, and that's kind of like what it was. But yeah, my parents broke up when I was about sort of 10. There was a lot of sort of disruption around that sort of time, and sort of prior to that, my mum, her family, again, they all lived quite close by, and then when I got to and then throughout my sort of late, sort of like from sort of 10 to 16, it was probably a lot of, there's a lot of moving around, a lot of disruption. And then I think that my mum was pretty much, she was quite sort of entrepreneurial herself, always like trying new things, doing things. And so was my dad, actually. My dad still is. And I think that's probably had a bit of an influence on my approach to life and how, if something's not working out, we'll just try something else, do something else, and it's not sort of quitting, it's just that thing didn't work out, just do something, try another thing. But then sometimes I do think it's to a bit of my detriment because you never really entirely focus on one thing.
I am guilty of that myself.
So,
do you have a relationship with both your parents?
Yeah, I do. My dad is, my dad lives close by, and my mum doesn't. She lives up north. Well, not up north. She lives in the East Midlands. Yeah, so I don't see her as much because she's further away. But I think, they had like a very sort of tough time, and I think for a number of reasons. There's a lot of stuff that happened when I was younger, and that stuff is just, yeah.
You mentioned the word disruption. What does that mean to you, and how has it impacted you?
I think when your parents separate, you kind of always think, I don't want to repeat that. I don't want to be like, I would like to, maybe, maybe I want that. But then I think that when you see people, that you like, if your parent or parents are separated, or even if you have like a mum that's like raising you on your own, or a dad, whatever, I think it gives you, it's not really a thing where you think it can't be done. So you never think, oh, I could never like be a single parent, or I could never be on my own. So yeah, I think that's how it kind of maybe impacts you. But I don't think that's a bad thing. That's the thing. I actually think that's quite positive to be quite independent, because I think a lot of people end up staying in things that can be quite toxic and negative for them. And traditional values, which I do still think traditional values have their place in like modern society, we also have to like remember that some of the traditional values were stem from like really archaic times when people only lived to like 40. So being together forever, you know, you was going to die at 40 anyway, so it didn't really matter. So, you know, being together forever when you're like until you're 90, it's
There's a
out
whole
of
lot,
date. Yeah. And then also as well, you just don't, not everything has to be so I know people now that, you know, have separated in a very sort of civil, you know, diplomatic, you know, way, and they're happier apart.
Yeah.
But then I know people that have stayed, and you know, it's not necessarily the best thing for them.
I completely agree with you. Me being one. Me being one of those people. I think we live in a generation now where it's more common to actually separate and, like you said earlier, try new things. I'm not saying that's what people should do. Not saying that for 1 minute, but I myself, people know that obviously, yes, I'm 30. I've got 3 kids, divorced, but that doesn't mean that I've not tried everything I possibly can to work out the marriage. However, it didn't work out. We actually get on better now than we did when we was together. However, when my parents separated, it did impact me massively. And I did stay there, admittedly, too long for the wrong reason. So, and my ex-wife knows that. Which I hold my hands up to. But that was obvious. That was obvious to her, and it was obvious for everyone to see.
Yeah.
And it does cause an issue. It causes an issue between you two, and it causes an issue with you and the kids. So yeah, I mean, it is like 100% agree with you. So 10 to sort of 16, all your school years, what were they like?
Well, they're all right. I mean, school was pretty. I think I could have had a better education, but again, you don't know what you don't know, really. I mean, I went to an okay school in that there was. I mean, it wasn't a good school in terms of academic kind of education, but in terms of the people that went there, it was pretty. There's nothing really massive to report on, neither good nor bad. Like, I weren't bullied at school. I weren't a bully. I wasn't hugely popular. I wasn't hugely unpopular. I was sort of very middle of the road. It was very. It was at a time when the area that I went to school in was very. The first school I went to a school in Tottenham, and that was a little bit. Yeah, it was a little bit rough around the edges, and then I changed schools, and went to a school in Enfield, which was really. It was not diverse at all in terms of racial demographic.
For anyone watching, I'm Arsenal, she's Tottenham, so Tottenham is rubbish.
Yeah. So, and I'm not a football supporter, so like whatever. But I would say Tottenham though, sorry. So I went to school, and then I went to this other school, and it was just very sort of, it was mainly sort of English, really English, very sort of English working class demographic, and then a couple of, a lot of like kids that were from Tottenham that used to go down on the bus, and I was part of that sort of group of people, kids, mainly sort of like we were like of Caribbean descent or, and we went there, and I think it was like kids were sent there because it was a better education than some of the schools down in Haringey. And it was okay. I mean, there was nothing, the kids, and now the people that I know from that school, we've all done all right. Again, everyone I know, there's no one, I can't report any sort of people have been, terrible things have happened to them. If I ever bump into anyone, I'm always hearing good things like, oh, I've got, a couple of kids, I'm married, I've got a nice home, got business, or, there's always really positive things. So that's really, school, it was maybe a bit boring. That was it really.
Talk to me about your relationships that you've built after school.
Oh, okay. So because school was like quite far from where I lived. So I was travelling sort of 6 miles a day to go to school. And then after that, I wouldn't really hang out in the area after school because you had to come home. And then weekends, couldn't bother to go down there either. So I've got a few friendships, people that I still keep in contact with, but not really now from school. So afterwards, I met, mainly my friends were people that I met through work. I've got 2 really close friends, but they're people that I've known since I was like 6. I'm still like really close with them, 2 good friends. But then the majority of my friends that I've become close with over the years are people that I met through work. Probably one of my closest friends, she's someone I worked with in the music industry. Another friend who was a friend of her friend, and we sort of, and then you form sort of groups, and then people sort of add, and then before you know it, there's like you're a group of like 4 or 5 really close friends. And that was through different ways really. I can't, I think one of our friends, she became a lodger of the other friend, and I don't know, when you sort of go back to your close-knit, oh, how did we all meet, and you sort of go pinpoint back, and it is usually quite.
What about your intimate partner, your other?
I like other boyfriends. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was, I was with my daughter's dad for quite a while, and then we separated, and then, I still sort of date people. I'm single at the moment, but I'm not really. Yeah, I know that's always everyone's always trying to hook me up, and I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, gosh, what do you say about that? What do you say?
That's on you.
I don't know.
What happened?
Exactly, there's nothing that's happened. It's just, I think, when I think about what my life is and what it is every day, you have to put time into relationships, and then you also have to sacrifice. And there's a little bit of me that's like quite selfish in that department. So I've had my daughter, and obviously I've been raising her by myself since she was probably about 4. And the early years when she was like quite small, it was very much like, firstly, if you break up with someone, you don't like just go, oh, right, well, I know some people do, but I wasn't like, oh, right, great, I better go and find another boyfriend or, and get married. I was like, no. I think I'll just, work this bit out for a bit. And then my daughter was small, so I wanted to just be really involved. It was the early years, she was new at school. We did a lot of activities after school, and I was always, really hell-bent on being an active parent and being with her. So that kind of was a period where I didn't really want to be involved. And then you have another stage where maybe my daughter's now sort of approaching 9, 10, and I'm like, I probably really won't want anyone in my home right now, because I've got another set of things. She's sort of growing up, and then I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do a master's. And then it just sort of goes on, and then before you know it, you're like, oh, okay, right. And then it gets to a point where my daughter's like, oh, for God's sake, what about him? Like, can't you get out of him? And I'm like, no, I'm all right. I'm really quite okay. So I have obviously dated people and been out of people in between, but not really wanted to have and I was someone that I was with for quite a few years, but, and that was when my daughter was smaller, but she was sort of like like a tween or whatever, and I was with him for a bit, but it's not really been something where I've been like, oh, I have a relationship, I really want to be with someone. And sometimes I feel a bit bad saying this, because people think, oh, you must want a relationship because everyone wants to be with someone, and oh, you must be so broken, that's why you've not met anyone. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just that there's always these like periods in my life where it's just not quite right, and then sometimes I'd feel that I'm making almost I'll be apologising and say, oh yeah, I'm going to start dating people now, or yeah, I'm going to find a life partner. And I think I'm saying that to make people feel comfortable, not me. And I'm like, I don't care. And that's it. I don't know if that's. So I did a master's, and that took 2 years of my life. And you know, when you're doing a master's, we was talking about this before, weren't we? Like, you're literally, I was locked in a room, or I wasn't, you know, it was voluntary. I was locked in my own room. I was like locked in my room because we'd moved at that time. We'd moved to this little flat. And I'm like sat there for literally 2 years reading these journals and these books and trying to get my head around it all. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I'd only come out for like a social event, and that's like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm free. Let me be out. You're not thinking, oh my God, yeah, let me meet the man of my dreams. And like, I've got to go back in there and read about, you know, hereditaments and like, you know, case law, and it's quite intense. And then on top of it, I've got my daughter who, like I said, I'm a very like an active parent. I've wanted to make sure that she's, you know, getting the best education. She's like, you know, fully sort of grounded. She's like, you know, she's happy, and that's been my main kind of focus. And thankfully, touch with my daughter's, you know, she's really good. I'm really proud of her. She's clever. She's happy. She's,
don't like it when you keep taking her away on holiday though.
No. And then we'd go on holiday like 3 or 4 times a year. It was really like sometimes 5. And there was a point where she was like, oh look, I really don't want to go away again. It's just tiring. And then we stopped for a while. I was like, all right, we won't go away anymore. I mean, it weren't like big holidays, massive, like, you know, going to, I don't know, the Maldives it was sometimes, you know, like little breaks away to Europe, and then maybe 1 or 2 big holidays a year. So we was really fortunate to do that. But so you have all that going on, and then also it's a little bit of like, you know, anyone who comes into your life, it's got to be really good, because actually I've created quite a nice life here. So I don't want anyone in it that's going to be sort of, you know, messing up the equilibrium. It's got to be, you come with something really nice and stable and fun and happy and joyous. And then you meet people and you're like, oh shit, this person's really miserable. Like, you can just do one, you know. And you do meet people and you'll have conversations and you'll be like, oh, okay, all right. And you think, that just sounds like misery. That just sounds like a job that I don't want.
Tell me about your masters.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, it was really good because like I was learning, and that's the first time I've gone back to education. I've sort of done my first degree when I was 18, and to be honest, that was I was 18, had a lot on, I had quite a few jobs at the time, and I probably didn't put in the effort that I could have. And there was a lot going on at that time. And then my second degree, I was like, no, I'm going to go and I really want to like smash this. I want to come out with like a distinction or a merit at least, and I'm really going to try and absorb this information. And it was quite hard because I'm dyslexic, and because I'm dyslexic, I was like, oh my God. Like the first week, I remember sitting on my bed thinking, shit, how do you write a report? Like, I've never written a report. I've been working for myself all these years. I'm like, you know, I've created these systems that don't really, they just make sense to me. So, I did get a bit of extra support because universities have like, you know, additional support for you, and they teach you how to learn basically, because we've all got different learning styles. So for me to absorb the information, they'd give me different, they just gave me like different material and stuff to sort of like, there's like these kind of programs where you can put the text in, and then it translates it to audio, audible. So I'd do that. Or there's like even some sort of text that will be in a different font, so it's easier to read. So we sort of did all that kind of stuff. So I'm sort of, when I was diagnosed as dyslexic, they knew that I'd had like already developed like really strong coping mechanisms, because I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. And so it's not as kind of hard as, there might be people who've got like a more severe case, but it's just like I can read something, can write something, and it will be written sort of maybe almost backwards. And I won't see the error. I just won't see it. No matter how many times I read it, it just won't be visible to me.
I think it's amazing that you continue to strive for more. And obviously I know you,
Yeah.
You're consistently striving for more, and we're going to talk about what it is that you've recently done. Where does the fire come from in order to do that? Because people that are listening, and maybe someone that is dyslexic, that's like, I can't do that. Well, you're living proof that you can do that. That you've
Yeah.
built a property portfolio, brings you a nice piece of income. You've got a bachelor's, you've got a master's, and you're consistently driving for more. Why?
I think, just sort of still continue a little bit with the masters, I think with that, it was a challenge, and I think I like a challenge. And I honestly just signed up for it thinking, all right, so I've not written an essay, and the thing is, I probably never ever wrote an essay. I was always someone, and this is typical sort of dyslexic behaviour, I'd sort of skirt around it. Even when I did my first degree, I'd write captions like, this is why I did this, and it'd really need to be like an essay, and they'd be like, oh, you need to expand on that more, and I'd be like, oh yeah, and I kind of managed to get around it, and that's why I didn't do very well in my first degree. But this time I was like, okay, and that was the challenge. So I had to really actually apply myself and really find the ways to kind of learn. So what I think I don't really know what it is. I can't say there's one thing that sort of keeps on like driving me forward, but I don't think I know any other way to be. Like, I think that's just integral to who I am now. I think I'm always going to do. I'm always going to be a doer. So I'll always be, like, sometimes I'm sitting down and I think, oh yeah, I'd like to learn French. And I think, oh, I'll do that like in 5 years. And I probably might, because I just think sometimes I think of something, and once the seed's planted, it might not happen like immediately, but it will happen at some point.
Has there ever been anyone that's told you can't do something?
Oh yeah, all the time. You shouldn't tell me that. That's terrible. Because when they say you can't, I'm like, oh yeah, that means you just don't know the way. There's another way to do it.
That's what drives me.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I've had a lot of people say, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. And that's in all kind of areas of life. Like, even with like property strategies, people would say, oh no, you can't do that. And I'd think, no, you can. Or I'd think, well, you just don't know how to do it.
Give me an example, because you've done a lot of property strategies. You've not just done one.
Yeah. Let me just think of something. Yeah, I mean, I think like even like title splits. I think someone said to me when I bought property. This is one particular property I bought, but because I owned it, they said, "Oh, you can't do it." So I was like, "Okay, so you're just not the person that knows how to do it." But then I had a chat and spoke to a couple of other people, and you can split titles, but you've got to have like a separate entity. So you have a separate limited company structure, and then the freehold is held in that. But the person told me you can't have it because you can't be the owner of leasehold and freehold at the same time, which is true, correct. But it just meant that I needed to have a limited company, the freehold held in a limited structure. So the two entities are not the same. So that's just one example. But, it was told, no, it's just not possible. And, and I mean, even in the early years, people used to say, oh, because when I started, people, like, buy-to-let was, like, not that popular. People weren't buying properties like how they are now. Like, not everyone, but a lot of people have got an additional property for their, pension or something. But I remember in the early years, that even when I was viewing properties and I was saying to this, agent, oh, I'm going to buy, a few. And he's like, oh, well, you can't really. And he was an estate agent at the time because, you won't get all the mortgages and things. So I usually think that if the majority of the time people are saying you can't do it, it's more based on what is in their view, what they think is possible. And there is probably a little bit of, you can't do that, maybe. I don't know, maybe they think you can't do it. Maybe they think they can't do it, so you definitely can't do it. Got no idea.
And you're also known as the short lease queen.
So I like short leases because you can add a lot of value to properties through short leases. And I started off with the leasehold property that I mentioned, and that was not a short lease, but it was also like really undesirable because people don't want leasehold houses. The majority of people that own houses or buy properties are very, meticulous to detail when they're buying a property. How many times do you get a survey report back, you petrol, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with the guttering, I'm not going to buy it. People don't understand, the intricate details of property. So when I bought that, it was because no one wanted it. But I was like, well, it's 996 years. Like, it's going to be, like, flat on the ground in that time. So it doesn't mean nothing. Peppercorn rent of, like, I think it was, like, £5 a year or something. And that kind of sparked the initial, like, okay, the leasehold, there's something going on here. And then I can't remember who it was he told me, but I used to always chat with the agents. I still talk to a lot of agents now in my sort of patch North London. And I just sort of used to, like, pick their brains and say, oh, what else you got? What's in the drawer? Because it used to be the drawer then. It weren't like Rightmove. I'd be like, that property, what properties have you got been sitting there for a while? And they'd be like, oh, we've got this one, but you don't want this. It's got a short lease. And I'm like, well, what's that mean? Why? Why don't people want it? Oh, because then you've got 60 years on the mortgage. You can't, on the lease, you can't get a mortgage. And I'd be like, oh, okay, all right then. And then I'd go away and talk to my broker. I'd be like, well, it's got 60 years. What does that mean? Can I... And then I started to find out that you could get mortgages. And so I started buying short lease properties. And I did a couple for other people. And then when I separated from my daughter's dad, I had to sell my house because I run into not financial difficulty, but it was just my income was going to change. So I sold my house, and a flat that I found was a short lease property, and it wasn't that short at the time. It's probably about 76. So I got a mortgage, did the refurb, extended the lease, and added value, and I think that was like the second or third one I done. But then I just started rinsing and repeating and buying.
So for anyone listening, I mean, what's the average you would say in your portfolio that, I mean, you can sort of make, what's the average amount of money you'd make on extending a lease?
Well, with extending the lease, the last couple that I have done, they've been really quite good, because they're, I think there's people will say like time in the market or time in the market. I do think there's something to be said about time in the market as well. Not, so I bought during the pandemic. So, it's also about like sort of understanding the sort of people's sentiments at the time, how people were feeling about the market. And I know that everyone was feeling, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? We're going to have a massive dip. So I did buy a property quite cheap. I bought two that were quite cheap, and I managed to sort of almost double their value by extending the lease and doing a refurb. And then the one that I did previous to that, the other two that I did previous to that, one I doubled the value, and the other one I increased it by probably about 35-40%.
And what sort of deposits are you looking at putting down on that? Because this is in London.
2 of them in London, 2 of them in East Sussex. What sort of deposits? What, as in, 25%?
And how much would that be?
Well, the values were probably, probably about 35-40k, around about that.
And this is, because remember when we had the chat, but this is quite a while back now, and he was like, just put the 25% down, you can get a mortgage, and it's completely blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. There are still other, like, it does limit your lenders that you can go to. But, and also it depends on what you want to do with the property, because some people could just buy it as a buy-to-let, and then you can just, it might not need a refurb, so then you keep it in your portfolio, and then like maybe you wait for 2 years and then you do extend it. There's no, I mean, for me, I've not, I think it's a good way to sort of build a portfolio and then think about how you're going to, in the future, you can extend that if you're going to have that money to do it, because it's usually costly.
The thing is, like, it seems normal to me now, only speaking to yourself and obviously Jason Patterson, but before, it appears to be so overcomplicated. But the way you explain it, the way Jason explains it, it's just normal now.
Yeah.
And the amount of value you can add to a property just by extending the lease, if done correctly, I've got to say that if done correctly, it's ridiculous.
Well, a lot of the thing is, not to make it sound too easy, but I do think there are certain properties that there's still other variables within that. Like, you might want, if you're buying certain properties that maybe are over 4 floors, and there's another kind of caveat, like lenders don't like, since Grenfell, lenders or surveyors don't like to lend over 4 floors. Certain areas, if it's got a management company managing the freehold rather than a freehold direct, that can be a bit more sticky, because sometimes they don't want to get into the whole passing on the Section 48 before you actually complete, because I always try and request that that's thrown in as part of how you do the conveyancing throughout the purchase. So it's not complicated, but it's just about knowing all the different variables that, are part of it. Also knowing the cost of the lease beforehand, so that you don't get into hot water and it's more than what you anticipated spending. There's a number of things. Certain areas I don't think it really works, but then that's like with all property, isn't it?
100%. And then what's your sort of top piece of advice for anyone looking to get into property or short leases or any type of property strategy that you would recommend?
I think, and I wish I'd sort of, not a wish, but I remember when I first started out in property, and there wasn't like all this property education that's out there now. Like you can go to, I think it's a good thing in some ways that you can go to somebody that, you can relate to and get property advice, because ultimately training programs are about people buying into people really more than sometimes the content. But I remember I used to go to the Property Investor Show at the Excel Centre, and that's where I got my property education. So okay, I need to know something, and we'd go there like once or twice a year and sit in these seminars, and they'd give you, advice on various different things. And I remember, I don't know who it was now, because I don't think he was like that famous, but it was just somebody who kind of like was in the property industry, did like a panel discussion. And he said that you should always be like buying, like retaining and flipping at the same time. And I think that that's what people should do. I think if you're trying to build a portfolio, and you've got to retain and flip simultaneously, so that you're like deleveraging your portfolio, and then eventually you work on your exit strategy. Because most people are so fixated on getting into property, but they're not thinking about the sort of 10, 20 years time when I'd think like, maybe you do want to exit after 20 years.
100%. How
are you getting out? Because otherwise you're going to be left with these like huge mortgages, which you may or may not be able to,
I'm so glad you said that. I've just done my first ever public speaking gig at the weekend with Tanner Hicks. Massive shout out to Tanner. And we spoke about a business plan, and not one person had a plan of what they was going to do with their portfolio, and it amazed me.
Yeah.
Because you're putting all this money into your properties, or these were, but no one had an idea they was going to exit, or when they was going to exit. I'm thinking, you're fucking like leveraged up to the eyeballs, or potentially going to be like geared up to even at 75%.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like you've got to have a plan in whether it be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You've got to have that plan in place.
Yeah. I think you should think about the plan as early as possible. Even myself, I probably didn't think about it as early as I should have, because I've been doing life. I've been like living my life with my daughter, and
you should do. You should live your life, but like
but you do need to think like at some point you're going to be like getting older. Like I'm not old yet. I'm like 45. I've still got like another 20 years of working if I'm doing it the way that they want us to do it. But you still should, like, if you think about that early, and think about what you want your life to look like at, like, say 45, 50, then you can start planning ahead for that. And I just think it's really important to do that, because I haven't ever heard anyone sort of say.
So how do we do it?
How do we do it? I don't know, I'm working on that plan. I think you do. I think you flip, so you deleverage your portfolio.
We pay the mortgages off and pay the mortgages off over time.
Yeah, start paying them off. Look, most people are talking about, I want to have 20, 30, 40 properties. That's great. But you've also got, every time you're buying, you're increasing your, you're increasing the amount of money that you borrow. And you may, all right, you can have more cash flow and you'll be able to pay them down. But, you could do that quicker if you were sort of, getting some larger chunks of money, or if you've got another form of income, if you aren't full-time in property.
Yeah,
But I
no,
do
agree.
think it's good to pay them down. I mean, I know everyone, and then there's other strategies where people say, oh, you know, you just let it and then you pass it on because there's no capital gains in death, whatever. That's
Horses
not
for
what I
courses,
want to do,
yeah.
yeah.
So what are you up to at the moment?
Well, what am I doing at the moment? I've just, so I'm training to be a surveyor. I've been doing that for a few years. So I'm trying to go to more sort of commercial real estate. That's what the kind of masters was based on. And this is sort of like when you become a surveyor, the masters is very sort of commercially focused. So becoming a surveyor is sort of almost like the icing on top of the cake, and you probably should take advantage of, you know, access to doing that. So I've just finished my APC training almost, which is to become a RICS surveyor. And that involved quite a bit. So I had to do a case study, a career summary, which, you know, details your, you know, competencies, what experience you have, what experience you've gained, some CPD, and now I have a final interview, which will be later on this year. And I have to now sort of like get cracking with like severe revision and understanding sort of the RICS inside out. So yeah, that's fun. That part of it actually is quite fun because I started doing a bit of revision at the weekend. I was like, oh, actually, I quite enjoy reading and understanding this. The writing part, I'm not such a fan of. I was like, oh, because I just had to do like my first sort of commercial valuation, and commercial valuations. You know, everyone, we all do like these. Well, not we all, but you know, a lot of people do like valuation packs and stuff. So this was like a proper sort of commercial valuation, and it's very different to sort of throwing together a valuation pack. So I can see why sometimes surveyors are like, you know, you get two types of surveyors. Someone like, I'm not interested in listening to your, you know, valuation pack that you knocked up on Canva. Yeah.
It's true though. It's true, but yeah, why did you want to do that?
You know what? I think the reason why I've started this whole sort of academic sort of route into sort of property was because you do it for years and years and years. Like I said, and I've done I've project managed all my own refurbs. I've learned very much on the job, self-taught a lot of it, you know, I've learned through talking to agents, other, you know, conveyancing lawyers, any like property brokers, any property professionals. That's how I've got my information. I never did a training course with anyone or anything. And it got to a point where I was just like, I was stuck, and I just thought, I don't know what to do anymore in here. And I've done this for so long. I've not got another career, like, because I started at the point where my peers were probably getting their corporate jobs. I left all that and just thought, no, I'm going to start up and be on my own. And now I'm at a stage where I just got to a stage where I was like, I don't know enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I really felt at that stage, I just don't know what I'm doing. And then I did the masters, and I was like, oh, I do know what I'm doing. I do understand this, because all the principles are very similar in commercial to what you've done in Resi, but it's just a lot more intense. And then also there's law, and there's ratings, and there's development appraisals, and there's a lot more, you know, more depth. But the principles remain the same, or similar. They don't like you to say that Resi's like commercial and commercial. Like, you can't do that. And then the surveying thing, and again, I sort of, a lot of the time you speak to people, and I've had people say to me, you know, it's a very male dominated space. Or everyone I knew in property was male. It's not really even been a thing really, actually, because I never really thought of it. It's just like, oh, it's property, it's male, that's what it is. And but you do sometimes, you know, you get a bit of mansplaining quite a lot. You know, people talk to you like you don't really know what you're talking about. Sometimes you're talking to people that you've got much more experience in then, and they're still talking to you like, you know, in a patronising way. And so I thought, no, I'm going to go and get my stripes. I'm going to be like, I'm a surveyor or whatever. And then you do all this, and then you feel, oh, it don't even really matter. But it does matter, but it doesn't. You know, it matters because it matters to me, and it was now. And also, I think after 20 years, you want to come out of something, doing something where you've been kind of, you know, buying and refurbishing properties essentially, and have something a bit like a proper career from it, really. So yeah. And I do also want to go more into sort of more service-based kind of work rather than actually, you know, I don't know if I necessarily want to be like building a massive portfolio now. I'll still probably buy properties. I'll still probably get involved in projects, but I'd rather probably work more on that side of things.
Just as and when.
Yeah, definitely as and when. I'm not in
Too
a
much
like.
headache.
Yeah, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I'm going out and seeing this property. You know, I will if something comes up and I want to buy something and it's a good deal and I'd like to do a project that's interesting. I'll definitely still do it, but I've not got that kind of like drive when you first start out. Like, oh, I want to get 5 properties. I want to do 10 properties. I want to do 20. I don't really feel like that. No.
Well, I think you're an absolutely amazing human.
Oh,
I think
thank
your journey's just gone like that, and massive upwards trajectory, and I can't wait to see what the future brings. And anyone that's listening, please reach out to yourself. And where can everyone find you?
I'm on Instagram as DS Land and Development. That's the main place you'll find me. Or on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's the main places you'll find me really. I have a little website as well, but everything is mainly sort of on Instagram. I try to keep it a bit fun on Instagram.
Demelza, you've been amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me.